I guess what the Attorney General is saying is that parents will take to physical violence at some of these meetings, but I don't understand the basis for that because I haven't seen any information to support it. If we're going to use a national police force locally, I want to know what the intelligence or information is from the FBI, who's supposed to report to the Attorney General. Does the FBI have information to support this allegation? Are they saying people have been threatened, or they have good credible reporting say people will be threatened at parent-teacher meetings or school meetings in municipalities, which are a local matter, which are a state and county matter, not a national law enforcement matter? And if there is, then maybe there's a basis to do that. A lot of times we do joint work that is federal and state come together to do certain law enforcement engagements when appropriate. It happens a lot. But I'm wary of the Attorney General entering a political fray by saying, well, because I received a letter from the National School Board Association, I'm going to respond publicly. He could have taken another approach and directed the FBI to engage local law enforcement quietly and gone to them in person and said, do you have any merit? Do you have any information to support this accusation? And if you do you need funding? So a lot of questions, probably not a lot of answers at this time, but that's kind of where I'm at on that.
So, I was just interviewing someone who's been active around the Loudoun County Public School Board. And I was, and this is one of the groups ostensibly has been very active and agitated. And, I asked her, do you feel there's any threat of violence or anything like that? I haven't seen anything like that. Yes, we're very organized. Yes, we're very active. It feels to the people that have been active in these situations that I've been speaking to as if this is kind of a stretch to attract, sort of federal scrutiny.
Well, I think there's a lot of credence to that without having access to the underlying information. I haven't seen an uprising or a case where it merited federal, national attention. God forbid, even if there was an incident at a local school board meeting, it's a local school board meeting for local authorities and sheriffs.
As in, like, there's actually a fight.
Right. Even if that were to happen, hopefully it doesn't, but even if that were to happen, there would be a state matter, a county matter, a municipality matter for local law enforcement. It's not one that you send in federal agents to. That's just not what federal law enforcement is for. Unless they're telling the nation that the problem is so entrenched from East Coast to West Coast in every municipality, like the MS-13 example, right, that we have to have a federal task force set up. And I haven't seen any mass breakouts of violence at school board meetings. But to say that domestic terrorism is on the rise, I think is not helpful, because that crime itself doesn't technically exist in the federal statute. I think what the viewers need to understand from my time as a national security prosecutor and a terrorism prosecutor is that domestic terrorism isn't a separate criminal offense. International terrorism is a separate criminal offense. Domestic terrorism, to get into the specifics, is a sentencing enhancement. So basically you say X individuals committed a crime, and under the sentencing guidelines after they're convicted, the U.S. government comes in and says, we want to sentence them to even more time than normal because their activity was so unusually harmful based on the domestic terrorism sentencing guideline. But the activities that people associate with domestic terrorism are also blurred now, because I think there's been too much politicization of what is and is not DT, domestic terrorism. And I think, if we're talking about this school board stuff and anywhere near domestic terrorism, I think we're way off point. I think if you recall, out in the Pacific Northwest a couple years ago in Oregon, there was a number of Americans who basically commandeered big pieces of land and said the U.S. government is not welcome here. Those cases went through the courts, and they were viewed under the light of domestic terrorism. Now, I think there's more of an application in that scenario than anything that we're talking about with this letter.
So people who are advocates of critical race theory and related disciplines often have this maxim, speech is violence. And I'm wondering if this isn't something that's kind of playing in here.
Maybe. I think you could probably take a look at it from both sides to say, if parents are just going to school board meetings to voice their opinions, that's totally legit. especially at public schools, when they want to know what their children are being taught. Totally rightfully so, right? And if on the other side, the U.S. government has information that says, no, this kind of behavior leads to direct violence, and so much so across the country that we need to interfere or intervene, then maybe they're on the right. But I am likely to believe the former versus the latter.